welcome once again to our delightful philosophical conversations. Today, we're embarking on a new adventure. We are going to talk about a book called Letters from a Stoic by a philosopher named Seneca. It's true that this book, Letters from a Stoic, is a compilation of a series of treatises from Seneca's letters to Lucilius, his greatest friend. So, the first part we will address is precisely about friendship. It's how Seneca refers to friendship in these letters addressed to his greatest friend. But before we dive into that, I wanted to give you a quick introduction, talking a bit about the phenomenon of Stoicism as a whole. Stoicism, in fact, was born in Greece with Zeno, who founded it. It deals with a moral philosophy where people's lives are a clear demonstration of what they think. In other words, practical morality and teaching through example, a philosophy grounded in something that a person can live by and not just theorize about, is tremendously focused on correcting the moral imperfections of humanity and less concerned with highly metaphysical matters. This was very necessary at that time when we were experiencing a crisis in philosophy in Greece. Political crises, including Hellenism, devalued thought and moral reference, causing Greeks to lose identity. Zena's school promoted a simple life with strict morals. The fact is that Zeno founded this school that advocates for an extremely simple life, but with moral rigor above all. For centuries in history, when a person was very strict with their way of life, it was said, that's a Stoic. Only from, let's say, the 17th and 18th centuries, with the Enlightenment and the great classical rationalism, did this old nomenclature begin to fade. Many centuries later, it is still said, this man is very serious, very upright. That's a Stoic. He desires very little for himself and is very strict regarding his moral principles and is a Stoic. Sometimes it was even exaggerated. So, Stoicism always left this mark of moral integrity at any cost, but at the same time of serenity and peace of mind that no crisis, no external disturbance could break. It was a person who was autonomous. A person whose happiness depends solely on themselves is a model for Stoicism. Anyway, after Zeno, there came two others who were disciples of Arcesilaus and Chrysippus, and after that, the so-called Middle Stoicism, which brought Stoicism from Greece to Rome, with figures like Pernicius of Rhodes and Posidonius of Apamea. We will see here that there is even talk about it. Cato, another philosopher who was a disciple of Pernicius of Rhodes, also followed his master to Rome. The establishment of Stoicism in Rome happened through these two or three philosophers, and it's interesting because Rome already had a more practical mindset, more focused on war, a political mindset, a mindset of social construction. In short, Stoicism almost became, we could say, the religion of the empire. It was adopted and highly valued within the Roman Empire. And within this context, in a clear historical sequence, the first of the great Roman Stoics. Lucius Annaeus Seneca is the one we will talk about today. Then comes the slave Epictetus, brilliant and wonderful Epictetus, the slave of Nero's secretary, who suffers atrocities at the hands of his master and yet remains a serene man, a man in control of himself and true to his principles. And last but not least, Emperor Marcus Aurelius. This created a very interesting dynamic because Marcus Aurelius was no longer a contemporary of Epictetus. He didn't know him, but he regarded Epictetus as his great inspiration and master. Imagine a Roman emperor who has a Roman slave as his master. That's quite intriguing, a philosophy that serves both kings and slaves. So these three are considered the golden trinity of Stoicism, and it's interesting to note a crucial point. Stoicism. It was born during a crisis in Greek thought. When it came to Rome, it also faced various crises. Therefore, it is a philosophy to recover man's moral status at a time when he is losing it. Amidst a series of historical, social, and political upheavals, It is a philosophy of restoring human integrity in character. When civilization seems to be in decline, it is the ideal philosophy for times of crisis. If you believe that we are currently experiencing a crisis of moral character, pay attention to Stoicism, as it may be one of the most suitable philosophical schools for such a time. Because it is practical, simple, experiential, and directs all its focus, all its efforts towards a strong moral recovery of humanity. And so we have, as the first of this golden trinity of Roman Stoics, Seneca, this figure we will talk about now. He is the earliest, the most ancient. He is contemporary with the birth of Christianity. He was born in Cordoba in the year 4 before Christ, and he died in Rome in 65 Anno Domini. All of us, or at least most of us, have at some point heard about the tragic circumstances surrounding Seneca's death. He was called upon by Agrippina to educate her son Nero. While Nero was under his guidance, he was a great emperor, but when he decided to experiment on his own and freed himself from his master's advice, he became a madman, an atrocious tyrant who ultimately victimized his own mentor. In other words, Seneca, his mentor and teacher, was sentenced to death by his disciple Nero. He was condemned to cut his own veins and bleed to death in a bathtub. He died in a horrific manner, and at the hands of the very person he had most strived to instill with education and values. But it seems that Nero's nature prevailed over all of that. Well, I begin this lecture by reminding you of how great he was as a lawyer, as a writer, as an intellectual, considered a touchstone within Roman thought. And I start with a phrase that I really like, which is part of these letters we are reading at a certain point in the letters to Lucilius. He says in the section related to philosophy, "The philosopher should be the educator of humankind." See how beautiful this is. I repeat, the philosopher should be the educator of humankind. It would be the philosophy that corresponds to teaching man the most difficult of all arts, which is the art of living as a human being, of being shaped as a human being. This is the philosopher's role. A person will have math teachers to teach mathematics, gym teachers to teach physical education, and philosophy teachers to teach how to live as a human being. It would be that educator well-versed in the art of living, which is the most important of all arts for this historical period, and should be taught as a priority over anything else. As Plato would say, long before this, what Plato intended was for a person to be shaped in a way that inclines their nature. For a human being to be well-formed, their character must be developed first, and only then should they be given more information. Because if we look at the great tyrants of history, they were exactly those men who caused the most harm, who were endowed with some intellectual knowledge, who had a charisma for oratory, who had a charisma for writing. If we take, for example, an Adolf Hitler, it would have been better if you were completely ignorant. In other words, going back to Plato's phrase, absolute ignorance is preferable. Then knowledge in the wrong hands, knowledge arms the moral foundation that a person has. Therefore, the first thing to do is through philosophy, to build a solid moral foundation in a person. Philosophy during this period was fundamentally about establishing a human sense of life and shaping the individual in values. This idea was widely embraced by the Stoics. Philosophy as the art of living, which should precede and accompany all other forms of education. Continuing, we will see that Seneca's works include these letters we will discuss, known as the moral letters. That actually are called human relations in this book. In this compilation we are working on, but at their core, the original name is this, the moral letters to Lucilius. These letters, which are Seneca's most well-known work, were written in the later years of his life. He had already fled Rome, on the verge of being condemned by Nero, and in these last years of his life, he writes to a Lucilius whose exact identity we do not know. Historically, we don't know who this character is except through him. Even though at times it is mentioned that Lucilius knows certain things or was born in a certain place, we know very little about this character. But he was someone Seneca loved deeply, to whom he devoted the last years of his life to educate, to pass on the entirety of his knowledge. Therefore, it is a beautiful work. It is considered Seneca's masterpiece and certainly his most well-known. He also wrote 12 dialogues and a 13th one, which was lost, about superstition, mentioned by St. Augustine in the City of God, but it is no longer known. A large part of his work has been preserved to this day. Additionally, he wrote several tragedies, totaling 9, based on heroes from Greek mythology. So, he was considered an extremely cultured individual, not just cultured in the sense of being extensive, but extremely profound in the moral advice he was capable of giving, deeply insightful in addressing life's questions. He discusses how to age, the brevity of life, the constancy of the wise, and many other crucial themes fundamental to human nature. He treats these topics very thoroughly in his work. Unfortunately, a work that has largely reached us today. So, within this compilation known as Human Relations, I apologize to you all because I know this book is not very easy to find. I found my copy in a second-hand bookstore, you know? Within the Human Relations, there are 4 chapters compiled, 4 books. The first about friendship, the second about books and eloquence, the third about the wise man and his attitude towards death, and the fourth about philosophy. All of them are precious. He speaks about the importance of friendship in a ceremonial manner. The value he placed on this is extraordinary. I believe that Seneca is not the only one who addresses the theme of friendship well, but perhaps he is the most profound when he talks about eloquence, the importance of books, the importance of productive reading, reading that transforms into life, that is integrated as a response to life when he speaks of man facing death, how the wise confront death, and when he speaks of philosophy. Truly, this work could be said to be the best of Seneca, and Seneca is the best within Stoicism and philosophy as a whole. So let's get started. Today we will discuss the first part, which is about friendship. We will have 4 sessions on this book. Today we will begin with friendship. Part of Lucilius' letters were lost. It is said that there were originally 22 books. It is mentioned that there were 22 books, and today only 20 remain. It's a shame because it truly is a sensational work, as I've already mentioned to you, the most read work of Seneca, and there's a passage I found wonderful from one of these letters that I brought for you, as a gateway for those who inspire us. At a certain moment, he turns to his dear friend, the one he considered both a friend and a disciple, and gives a wonderful moral exhortation, saying, "Yes, my dear Lucilius, claim ownership of your being, that is, do not forget. Do not let anyone steal you from yourself. Claim it at all times, in every episode of your life. The ownership of your being." And so we begin our dialogue on friendship, the letters in which Seneca teaches Lucilius about friendship, and these are very beautiful passages. Just to give you an idea, at some points I have mixed in quotes from other philosophers who also made beautiful contributions on this theme. So, at some point I will mix in some philosophers, such as Plutarch and Xenophon, just to have a comparison, and even Nietzsche. Let me find a bit about some thoughts as a comparison to see when the thinking of all these great philosophers expresses things that are very close, almost confirming and reinforcing the knowledge left by Seneca. So he begins by saying the following: reflect for a long time to know if you should choose someone as a friend, but once the decision is made, love him from the bottom of your heart. Talk to him as freely as you would with yourself. This idea is quite interesting, that in choosing a friend, you must exercise prolonged caution, because if you don't understand the reason for all this prudence, a friend to him is someone for whom you will share your life with someone for whom survival and well-being will be as important as your own, someone you don't want to depend on, but someone to whom you want to give your best. The hallmark of true friendship is this, ensuring that he can grow alongside you more than he would grow alone. This person must be beneficial to the laws of nature. He must be beneficial to humanity. He must be a person of integrity, of character, of value. Therefore, there is a lot of care in choosing, but once you have entrusted your friendship to someone, there is no longer any need for distrust or half-hearted friendship. A friendship that is merely convenient is not a true friendship. He begins by exhorting Lucilius precisely because Lucilius had sent him a messenger and said, "Look, this messenger is my friend, but don't say certain things about me in his presence." He says, "Lucilius, what do you call a friend? You are desecrating friendship. Would he be a friend if there are things about you that cannot be seen in his presence?" And he will give a long exhortation based on this flaw of Lucilius. It is a mistake to trust no one, just as it is to trust everyone. I would say that in the case of trusting no one, we act in the safest way. In the other case, trusting everyone is the most honest approach, meaning you give yourself with complete honesty, but with imprudence, because you might be giving yourself to someone who simply wants to use you and manipulate what you offer with such goodwill. But also, if you don't give yourself to anyone, you do not achieve one of the most beautiful human virtues, which is to create a deep bond with another soul. As another philosopher I greatly admire once said, "Recover unity in multiplicity every time someone intimately connects their soul to another soul." You recover a bit of unity in multiplicity. So the ideal would be to reconcile these two things where you are prudent in your choice, using all your discernment. But once you have dedicated your trust helps the other become more solid because you believe in them more than they believe in themselves. Your trust announces a future for this friend. That is greater than the present, a future you envision before them, which now extends your hand to help them reach, to walk with them and help them achieve. This is the result of true friendship. It is always a factor of addition. True friendship cannot be broken by hope, fear, or self-interest. If true friendship is hope, fear, or worries, nothing is powerful enough to annihilate it. It is what we carry with us when we die and for which we can die, whether we came here to recover a bit of that unity in multiplicity. To establish bonds that allow our soul to connect with another soul is like a part of the universe coming back together. When two pieces of the great puzzle fit together, we begin our future from this level, the level of having seen the world from two angles and not just one. We start a new experience from the level of having largely overcome selfishness, which is always our greatest enemy. Once I have united with another in such a way that their interest and mine become one, and I have no preference for my personality over the others, and that is true friendship. I have already begun to turn the game against the great enemy, the heresy of separateness, by uniting selfishness, because now a part of the universe has been restored through this union. If you look into the etymology, the universe is exactly about this. Versus uno, around the one. The universe is that which moves towards restoring unity, and a friendship moves in favor of the universe's course. Today I had the pleasure of reading Hecaton, who is the philosopher I mentioned to you, who was a disciple of Prenetius of Rhodes, a Greek philosopher who came to Rome, whose entire work we unfortunately lost. Do you know anything about him? It's said he was prolific in writing. We've lost so much over time due to fanaticism and a variety of factors. Only comments from others about him remain, saying how grand he was, and here Seneca quotes a phrase from him and says, "Today I had the pleasure of reading in Hecaton." He writes, "What progress have I made, or rather, how have I grown? What progress have I made? I have made great progress. I have become my friend. Seneca's great progress. You will never be alone if you have such a friend. You will have humanity as your friend. See how beautiful that is. How it corresponds to what I always tell you, the more inward, the more outward. The man who is a friend of his own essence, the human essence, endowed with principles, values, virtues. The man who is a friend of these laws that govern the universe, elevates everything back to unity. The man who is a friend of his own essence, which is a cell of the one. Through this friendship, he will certainly be a factor of addition in the lives of all those around him, and through this friendship, he can establish deep bonds with others because he has found himself deeply. He has made the first and most essential of all friendships the friendship of his existence with his essence. From your personal mask to your true identity. The more inward, the more outward. If I am deep in relation to myself, I can establish deep bonds with others. If I have progressed a lot, do you know what I did? I became my own friend. If you look further ahead, what he says about friendship is that a friend is someone who encourages, who corrects deviations, who reminds you of your true identity, who shows you the true direction expected of a human being. And have you started doing this with yourself? You are privileged, and from there, you can do the same with all of humanity. Continuing, he will talk about the friendship of the wise, which is something very interesting, and I ask you to pay attention to this. He will highlight a point that friendship is not established out of lack, but out of abundance. The man who can live a true friendship, a genuine bond with another, is not lacking in anything. He is overflowing, he is self-sufficient, but he does not want to give up the privilege of living the virtue of friendship. Therefore, he overflows. He does not form friendships to receive favors, quite the opposite. He forms bonds to give, to overflow, to share. And he exemplifies this precisely through the friendship of the wise one. The one who is self-sufficient still enjoys having a friend, even if it's just to put friendship into practice and not let such a beautiful virtue go unused. The sovereign good does not seek its sources externally. It is cultivated internally and depends entirely on itself. Therefore, a wise person has found all the fullness they need within themselves. He is a being who is well, at peace, serene. Therefore, he does not seek a friend as someone to lean on. He seeks a friend, someone who is a recipient of all the gifts of life that they have learned to gather, and who does not want to keep them just for themselves. We're calling that phrase from Gibran, right? We are enrichment stations for the gifts of life, so they do not want to retain these gifts of life for themselves and want to share them. And the friend gives them the honor of receiving these gifts of life, valuing them and living them. So this friendship of the wise is a reflection that well positions the idea of pre-Seneca friendship. It's not about having someone who can keep a vigilant eye on him in any situation in case of illness and provide assistance to him if he's imprisoned or in dire circumstances, but rather, it's about him keeping a vigilant eye on his friend if they are sick or helping them to get out of prison, where they might have been thrown by the enemy, the selfish person who makes a friendship with the perspective of obtaining favors, if necessary. Such a friendship is mistaken and will end as it began. Founded on interests, it will end with the exhaustion of mutual interests when the other no longer serves you. Remember that phrase I always repeat from Leo Tolstoy about someone who walks through a forest and only sees firewood for their own fire. If the other doesn't provide firewood for my fire, I don't even see them, only look at things, perceiving how they serve me, how they can meet my wants and needs. I said this will never be a true friendship. A true friendship subjects the character and disposition of the other to a rigorous test. But once I consider this other person a useful being, life as a whole. This friendship is there to gift the other with all the best that one has gathered in life. Something else creates a fleeting camaraderie, a relationship of exchanging favors, a complicity, but never a true friendship, which is based on abundance and not on lack. Those who are needy use the other as a private security plan, a private insurance. They do not consider the other to be the best place in the world to deposit their greatest hopes and your greatest achievements. I brought here an interspersed quote, as I mentioned I would, from Cicero, who also has a work exclusively about friendship and who also speaks wonderful things about friendship. He says that the one who has more confidence in themselves, who is so well armed with virtue and wisdom that they have no need for anyone and knows they carry everything within themselves. This person always excels in the art of making and maintaining friendships. In other words, he overflows with gifts and seeks in a friend someone worthy of receiving them, taking the friend's life as a part of his own. This person is skilled in making and maintaining friendships. This is Cicero, reinforcing exactly the same idea. Continuing, returning to Seneca. He reiterates this point with the following phrase: if we make a friend to free us from shackles, we create them. At the first opportunity, flee. They are circumstantial friendships, as they say. The friend chosen out of interest will only please as long as they are useful. If they no longer serve me, they cease to exist. That's why prosperous men are surrounded by a crowd of friends. But after a turn of fortune around him, there will only be a desert. The relationship you describe to me is commerce, not friendship. The Syrian probably wrote something to him, but we don't have those letters from Lucilius to him, only the responses he gave. That is commerce. That is an exchange of favors. That is not friendship. Friendship is not based on lack, but on abundance. It's a very interesting point that I made sure to highlight for you here because Plutarch has a book called How to Tell a Flatterer from a Friend. The ones we just saw gathering in droves around the powerful man are the flatterers. Plutarch has a rather curious and even somewhat humorous phrase. The flatterer is like a tick clinging to the ear of someone who loves glory. When a man is too vain, his self-esteem is exaggerated. It does what one might call an inflation of the ego. It practically leaves the door open for flatterers. Flatterers are those who pretend to believe in the self-image of the vain person. They flatter this mask of his when, in reality, they just want to exploit him and leave him with his fantasies. When the downfall comes, these are the sycophants, and it's very interesting in this book, How to Tell a Flatterer from a Friend, which is worth a good read. There are certain passages where Plutarch reinforces the idea that a friend knows how to be tough when it's necessary to give their friend a shake-up. They know how to say the right word, even if it puts their friendship at risk, to save their friend from an abyss. A friend is necessarily someone who always points upwards. They are not complicit when their friend falls into vulgarity or trivialization. He is always a support point for when this friend wishes to return to their path towards full human condition. And he makes a very significant distinction so that a person does not deceive themselves and never confuses a flatterer with a friend. I also brought as a counterpoint for you a passage from none other than Khalil Gibran, the prophet, in the chapter on friendship. Gibran also defines it beautifully, just to compare with Seneca, a passage from Gibran. He says the following, and that the purpose of friendship be no other than the deepening of the spirit. Your friends grow together. They are additive factors in each other's lives. For love that seeks more than the discovery of its own mystery is not love, but a net, and only the useless is caught. According to the most beautiful signs of true friendship, it's when you witness a very beautiful act by someone, an act of justice, an act of beauty, of kindness. When you see a landscape so stunningly beautiful, when you witness a marvel of nature, immediately that mental image comes to you. How wonderful it would be if so and so were with me, as so and so in your memory, in your life, is associated with the best. Because that is a true friend. They exist to share the best with you while there are people with corrupted souls who have friends, but they are not accomplices. A friend is always the one who comes to your mind when you see the most beautiful, kindest, and fairest things that exist in nature. And you remember saying, so and so would love to see this, so and so would love to be here. This is a good sign of a strong friendship. And he continues by saying that love has a mystery, and friendship is nothing more than a part of love, and this mystery of human existence is the fundamental object of true friendship. Gibran is also wonderful at describing such a noble feeling. Continuing with Seneca, he asks, "What is my goal when I make a friendship? To have a being for whom I would give my life, a being whom I would follow into exile, whom I would defend with all my strength against death. If I already have a friend, it is out of a desire to serve them and not for them to serve me." We diminish the greatness of friendship when we see it as a means to gain something. I reiterate what I often mention about Immanuel Kant when he says it is immoral to treat a rational being, a human being, as a means and not as an end in itself, especially when that human being is your friend, someone well connected, with status and fortune. It will never be friendship if it is nothing more than using the other as a means for someone you consider your only friend. These are the desires and interests of your personality, because a man like that, generally, is not even a friend to himself. As we mentioned earlier, if he were a friend to himself, he wouldn't do such a thing to someone else. He wouldn't use another person for petty personal interests. A friend is someone with whom we seek the good. See how beautiful it is to have a good partner to seek the good, to seek the mystery of life, as Gibran said, to seek to grow together. They are the ones who always lift you up, and when they stumble, you lift them up. There is a silent pact within friendship. Let's grow together, and you will be a good reason for me to grow. If I don't grow for myself, I grow for you, and vice versa. One is a powerful stimulus for the growth of the other, in such a way that alone they would not be as great as they are when we are together. Continuing with Seneca, there is a paragraph that I consider one of the most beautiful in this part about friendship. "My interest is intertwined with yours. I am not your friend if what concerns you does not concern me. Friendship makes us share everything. There is no longer individual happiness or unhappiness. Our two lives form just one. One cannot live happily if one only looks at oneself. When only personal interest is considered, it is necessary to live for others if one wants to live for oneself. Imagine something of such beauty, folks. I think some phrases like this would leave enough of a mark for someone to say a great man passed through here. What I find fascinating about Seneca is that he himself was aware of this, that he would leave a luminous and positive trail for humanity, which he speaks of for posterity, that he would be remembered, that he is aware. He is conscious of the legacy he leaves for the future, reiterating, just wait until the end so you can savor it. Like we savor an excellent wine, something endowed with exceptional quality. One cannot live happily if one only looks at oneself, when only personal interest is considered. It is necessary to live for others if one wants to live for oneself. In other words, I think about the whole. But I am the one who benefits because I refine my best tools to live and work for the greater good. I refine intelligence, refine will, refine love, refine creativity, refine initiative. I refine all the tools in the human kit that came into the world with me. Why? Because the needs of the world are many, and I want to address some of them before it's my time to step into the background. It's the best we can do for ourselves. It is about committing wholeheartedly to the whole, to humanity as a whole, to nature as a whole. This is beautiful. This is typical of men who are friends with themselves. They have this awareness. I brought you here another counterpoint that I find very interesting, Much later, of course, a few centuries later, Michel de Montaigne, the one known for his essays, had a very strong and profound friendship with another writer, Etienne de la Boétie. The beloved discourse on voluntary servitude, and this friend of his died much younger than he did. He writes a series of wonderful phrases about friendship, speaking about this friend of his, with whom he felt so complete, as if a part of himself had left. And this paragraph is very beautiful. He describes the concept of friendship in a manner similar to the way Michel de Montaigne does, where the souls of two individuals blend and merge with one another, creating a union so complete and profound that they lose the seam that once joined them. If I am pressed to say why I loved so much, I feel that it can only be expressed by this answer. Because he was him. Because I was me. For what I am and for what he is or was, we were one. If you realize the nobility that friendship once had before great minds of the past as today, it has often been reduced to a somewhat slippery collegiality, somewhat given more to circumstances than to a true feeling. How much this duty to help the other grow, to share all the good with the other? How much has this been forgotten, and how much have we lost one of the most delicious things in life? One of the things that we have in life. But there are some counterpoints, as we are wrapping up this chapter on Seneca, which is a small chapter. I brought you Socrates through the voice of Xenophon, but generally, we know that Socrates wrote nothing. We know Socrates through the works of Plato, but Xenophon, in a work called Memorable Sayings and Doings of Socrates, also speaks, placing Socrates as the main character. So, 2 phrases from Xenophon on Socrates: we must be honest in words and deeds. For the wicked have no virtuous friends, you see. We must be honest in words and deeds, not only because it is our duty to be so, but also because if we are not, we will never be worthy of true friendship. The virtuous are friends with the virtuous, who serve as an encouragement to one another to grow ever more in virtues, values, and wisdom. Continuing with Xenophon on Socrates, he says, friendship overcomes all obstacles to unite virtuous hearts. It's almost like an attraction that we can't quite explain. As Montaigne said, an almost magnetic attraction where the virtuous, without really knowing how, end up meeting at some point in the future. Because they work for the same cause, because they are part of each other. Friendship is a heart that dwells in 2 souls, as Aristotle said, a heart that dwells in 2 souls, a unique being that inhabits 2 bodies. In other words, the affinity of means, which are values, and ends, which is to add value to the world, to leave here greater than we arrived. Adding value to humanity is so significant that if means and ends are so similar, it's as if it were a single being seen by 2 pairs of different eyes. And together they are a force that unites the particularities of their masks, their personas, for a single purpose. They are a force and grow much more together than they would apart. A true friendship is a treasure. Continuing with Aristotle, he says that perfect friendship can only exist among the good. Among those who come together to commit a crime or to share a petty criticism, that is complicity. Complicity that dissolves when it becomes more interesting to talk about the person in front of you than about third parties. It obeys only interests. Unfortunately, it seems to me that this is much more common than friendship in our days. For Friedrich Nietzsche, friendship is when 2 people come together in search of some higher truth, whether it's just an upward journey towards the fullness of the human condition. Friendships can be made. That's why I usually say that a good friend tells his friend to grow up. Don't count on me to go down alone. I think it's an incredibly educational maxim. True friendship is a union centered around the expansion of consciousness, or the pinnacle of their possibilities. It is a joint effort, a collective endeavor for the evolution as human beings. There is a passage from Nietzsche that I find very interesting where he adds another detail to this issue of friendship. Those for whom I waited, whom I thought transformed, just like me, the fact that they have aged has distanced them. Only those who transform remain my friends. I found this passage of his interesting. What he talks about aging is not physical aging, but the aging of dreams. To settle, to give up on a quest, to live solely for comfortable survival. Those who do not move towards a better version of themselves, those who do not strive for self-improvement, unfortunately, have drifted away from me. Only those who constantly fight for self-betterment are truly my friends. It doesn't mean I abandon the others. It means that the points of contact, the affinities, become increasingly scarce. If they react and want to grow, I'm here again. But who doesn't aim for self-transformation, self-improvement? This friendship will certainly stretch like a thread until it breaks, because one moves forward while the other remains still. Friendship was recognized as a meeting point for those who strive towards the best version of themselves. If one becomes stagnant, inevitably, this thread will end up breaking. Returning to Seneca, there's a passage towards the end where he says something that seemed very interesting, very beautiful to me. What I mentioned to you. He is aware of the role he plays before posterity. He writes for posterity. Understand this and take a moment to think. We are the posterity. I am and you are Seneca's posterity. He writes for us and he does it so consciously. Look at these passages, beautiful. I work for posterity. It is in your interest that I write. I confer salutary advice to my works, which are like formulas for effective remedies. I have felt their benefits in my own wounds, which are not yet completely healed, but at least have stopped spreading. I have tested this knowledge on myself, and I leave it for you. I show others the right path that I came to know late, after many exhausting wanderings. After wasting much time, as we all do, after many mistakes, as we all make, but without losing the spirit of self-improvement, he arrives at a balm capable of halting the spread of his wounds and slowly providing them with healing. And this is the gift he consciously leaves for posterity, ensuring that the giving of a gift requires two things. The one willing to give a gift. The gift itself and the one willing to receive it is to open this package and make it your own, and that part is ours, and we have just received a gift. Think about that. Continuing towards the end, he mentions a quote from Epicurus, where Epicurus speaks to a friend of his. Epicurus, from another school, the Epicurean school, says to a friend who was seeking wealth, "Look, one day you will be considered special, not for all these riches you seek, but for having received letters from me." And then he turns to Lucilius and says the same thing. What Epicurus could promise is his friendship. I promise you, Lucilius, I will be favored by posterity. I can carry with me names whose survival I will grant them, as he gives you the greatest of gifts. He consciously elevates him along with himself towards posterity. And he knows that posterity will receive this message, will know how to use it, and will value it perhaps more than his contemporaries did. In other words, he expected this from us, that posterity would recognize the jewel he preserved for us, and now it's our turn to acknowledge it. Here we have the purest pearl of the description of friendship that we can gather from him in all these ideas that I use to support. It is a pearl and it is a gift. I hope you are open to receiving this gift. Thank you very much. We'll stop here and continue next week. We still have 3 more sessions on Seneca. See you.